Haven's POV.
I had forgotten how crazy the week leading up to opening night could be. Last week was already rough, with early morning classes and rehearsals and last-minute things being added or moved or cut. But this week was even worse. Plus, with it being a brand new company in the area and our very first premiere, the stakes were just higher all around. Nevertheless, Wesley had found ways to spend time with me. Saturday was a bust, as I slept in after our date and we had rehearsal all day after that, but Sunday we had brunch together, and Tuesday, he picked me up after rehearsal and drove me the walkable distance to my apartment building on his way back home from work. But even though we were spending time together when we could, and even though we'd shared that mind-blowingly amazing kiss on our date, neither of us had tried to kiss the other again. But I wanted to. Fuck, did I want to? Kissing Wesley was so different from kissing Lennox. Or any other guy I'd been with. With others, I kissed them because that was just what you did with the person you were seeing. With Wesley, it was like waking up when he kissed me. Like I could truly see for the first time. It was Wednesday, and morning class was just about to begin. I sat in front of the mirror as I waited for Anya to arrive and start bar when my phone vibrated in my bag. I grabbed it out quickly to see an incoming message from Wesley. Bossy Pants Wes. Good morning, Twinkle Toes. I smiled and giggled to myself. He had texted me so much since Friday night that he was bringing new meaning to unlimited texting. Me, it's like 10 a.m. Bossy Pants Wes, would you have preferred I texted you at 5 a.m. when I first woke up? Me, no. Bossy Pants Wes, that's what I thought. Me, eye roll emoji. Bossy Pants Wes, when does rehearsal start? Me, soon. I snapped a quick picture of myself in the mirror to send to him. Bossy Pants Wes. Beautiful. I scoffed at that. He was ridiculous. Me, don't even. I look like an exhausted pigeon. Bossy Pants Wes. But a beautiful exhausted pigeon, winky face. Anya walked in, and everyone stood up to get to their spots at the bar, so I quickly told Wes goodbye. Me. I have to work now. I will talk to you later. Bossy Pants Wes. Bye, Twinkle Toes. Class went by fast, and before I knew it, we were in the theater, on stage, in costume, running through the entire production. How do you do that? Ramon asked as I exited into the wings. How do I do what? I asked him as I grabbed my water bottle from its spot on the floor. Well, 1, you make that look so effortless. And 2, I swear you've gotten even better since a week ago. I glanced over at the dancer playing Prince Desire while sipping my water and shrugged. I've put in a lot of hours since I joined here, I told him. Practicing extra, going to almost every Saturday class dash. That's not it, he said, shaking his head. I mean, that may be part of it. But I think it has something to do with that boy you've been seeing. I nearly spat my water out at his teasing and waggling eyebrows. I don't think dating someone can make you a better dancer, I said with an incredulous laugh. Can't it though? He tilted his head and looked at me while deep in thought. I just stared back at him, confused. I considered his words, then laughed a little again, shaking my head. I opened my mouth to reply, but Ramon said, yep. That's definitely what it is, and then walked away to where he needed to enter. I stared after him as he danced through his entrance. Him telling me that was a pretty big compliment. I'd rarely heard him even give one word of encouragement to the other principals, let alone any of the soloists or demi-soloists. I moved out of the way of some of the other incoming dancers, grabbing my towel and dabbing at my neck and face to keep the sweat from dripping down into my costume. When we finished the run-through, Peter called us all out onto the stage so he could make a quick announcement. Don't forget to pick up your comp tickets for the premiere in the box office before you leave the theater today. If you don't grab them, we will reallocate them back to public availability. Also, let Valeria know if you will be bringing a +1 to the gala on Friday night after the performance, so we can get them on the list. He glanced around at everyone, and I swear his eyes lingered on me. That's all. The entire company began talking at once as everyone made their way off the stage and to either the lobby or dressing rooms, depending on if they needed their tickets still. I, luckily, had already gotten mine, so I made my way up the stairs to my dressing room. As soon as I walked in, my phone lit up on the makeup counter. I walked to it to glance at who the message was from, then did a double take. I sat down on my stool as I read and reread the message from Melissa. Melissa, hey Haven. Unfortunately, we won't be able to make it out to California for your recital this weekend because we didn't book our flights in time, and everything is completely sold out or ridiculously expensive now. I hope you understand. We will definitely try to make it out for another one. I'm just not sure when. Love you and good luck. I sat there and stared at the phone in my hands. I read the message repeatedly to make sure I hadn't misunderstood or misinterpreted or misread any of it. I lost track of how many times I read it. I lost track of how long I sat there. At one point, I thought I heard Peter's voice talking to me, but I wasn't sure. The theater emptied around me until it was just me and the silence. I don't know why it surprised me. They'd never really comprehended how important ballet was to me. But I thought they'd at least understand it was my first performance as a soloist instead of in the corps, that it was special and important. But no! They didn't. I set the phone on the counter and leaned forward, resting my head in my hands. Strong, sure, and deliberate footsteps sounded on the stairs, and I looked up as Wesley appeared in the doorway of my dressing room. He braced his hands on either side of the frame as he met my eyes in the mirror, assessing me. His chest rose and fell in heavy breaths, and a small crease formed between his brows. I smiled at him in the mirror. But as soon as my lips turned up, water lined my eyes, blurring his massive form in the reflection. In 2 long strides, he was across the room, wrapping his arms around my shoulders from behind me. My hands automatically came up and clutched at his forearms, my head leaning back against his solid, warm chest. His muscular arms held me with such care that I wanted to stay like that with him forever. My tears fell unbidden as he held me. I had spent the last almost 12 years reteaching myself to not cry, or to at least hold it back until I was alone. But with him, it seemed all of that went out the window. I couldn't hide my true emotions from him. And part of me didn't want to. What happened? Wesley asked, his chin resting on the top of my head. I nodded towards my phone on the counter, my throat too tight to speak. He loosened one arm from me to grab it, then handed it to me and wrapped me up again. His thumb rubbed my arm as I unlocked the phone and handed it to him so he could read the message. I watched his face in the mirror as he read, his brow furrowing with each passing moment. His knuckles turned white as his grip tightened with his rising ire. He tossed the phone onto my bag with a noise that was almost a growl. He moved in front of me and his hands came to my face, tilting my head up towards him as he wiped the tears from my cheeks with his thumbs, and I crossed my arms over my stomach, squeezing myself tight. I don't even know why I'm crying, I told him in a scratchy voice. After everything I've realized over the last week, it shouldn't even surprise me or upset me or anything, but You're grieving, he said, stepping as close as my tutu would allow, his brown eyes looking down at me with warmth. You've lost the family you convinced yourself you had, and have realized you can't trust the 2 people who you should trust the most. Of course you're hurt and upset. I don't expect you to get over something like that so quickly, he murmured, then leaned forward and kissed my forehead. Don't ever feel bad about crying in front of me. It's not a weakness, he added, his lips brushing against my skin. I nodded at his words. The way he understood my fears and doubts and insecurities, the way he could ease my mind with just his words and his presence and his compassion, was more than I could have ever expected from him. It sucks, I admitted to him, as fresh tears fell out of my eyes. It's like they don't even understand how important this is to me. Or maybe they do, but they just don't care. I don't know. I keep wondering why. I stopped and took in a breath, trying to calm myself and keep my voice from getting hysterical. Never mind, I said, shaking my head. Why they even adopted you? Wesley asked, pulling back to look at me in the eyes. My breath shook, and I nodded, blinking rapidly. Do you want me to call them? He asked, his voice strained and his eyes lit with anger and the promise of defending me. I can call them and give them a piece of my mind, and... No, I told him, shaking my head. It's not worth it. They're not worth it. I need to just cut them out of my life, and this is the perfect time to start that, I said. He narrowed his eyes, then gave a reluctant nod. I leaned forward and rested my cheek against his chest, our eyes meeting in the mirror as I continued talking. So, now I have these tickets to the premiere on Friday. And I don't know what to do with them. I'd give them to you, but I know you already bought some. And I don't want to give them back to the box office, because I'd rather give them to someone I know. He nodded as he listened to me babble, his gaze turning inwards and thoughtful. I have an idea, he said after a few minutes. Yeah? I asked, brightening a bit. Yes, he said with a small smile. Are you ready to get out of here? Definitely, I told him. I just need to change, I said, leaning back and gesturing at my costume. I'll wait outside your door, he said, then placed another kiss on my forehead before turning to leave. I stood from the stool, wiped my tears from my face, and then froze. Wes? I asked, swallowing as he turned around. I can't get this off by myself. I gestured vaguely towards the back of the bodice, where there was a line of about 20 hooks and eyes that I could not undo without help. You want me to? He asked. I nodded, and he inhaled slowly, then walked back over to me. His large hands worked with surprising gentleness as he undid each fastening, taking his time so he didn't ruin the costume. I held the front of the bodice to myself with my hands as his moved down my back, his fingertips occasionally brushing against my skin. And I don't think any of the touches were accidental. How do you get it on? Wesley asked. I have a dresser, I told him. His hands stilled on my back, and I felt him tense up a bit. Then his hands started moving again as he said, male or female? My brows moved together in confusion before I realized what he was trying to ask me. I lifted my eyes to meet his in the mirror and raised an eyebrow at him, a tiny smile threatening my mouth. Male or female, Haven, he repeated, my name spilling out of his mouth with a growl. If I say male, what will you do? I teased, leaning back slightly so his fingers met my skin again. Haven, he warned, his hands dropping from my costume and forming fists at his side. He tilted his neck to the side, cracking it slowly, and closed his eyes. His nostrils flared just a little and his shoulders rose and fell even more rapidly than when he'd first appeared in my dressing room doorway. I turned around and placed my hand on his chest, feeling his heart rate slow at my touch. Calm down, Palestine. It's Maya. Humph, he grunted, his hands grabbing my hips and squeezing slightly. It better be. He added. He tilted his head at me and raised his eyebrows, then he chuckled slightly. Palestine. Like pen pal? Yep, I chirped. He shook his head and laughed again. Just get dressed, twinkle toes, he told me, kissing my forehead one last time before he walked out of the dressing room and closed the door behind him.
Haven's POV.
Where are we going? I asked Wesley as I climbed into his truck, dressed in my purple leotard and black skirt from earlier that morning. It's Wednesday, he said as he pulled away from the theater. I cocked my head at him and waited for him to elaborate. Where did you see me last Wednesday? He asked. Oh! I exclaimed, my eyes widening. Oh, that's genius! I added as I realized who he was thinking I should give my premiere tickets to. You're welcome, he winked, grabbing my hand and bringing it to his lips to kiss. And I am definitely a genius. You're definitely cocky, I teased. His lips twitched into a smirk and I groaned and rolled my eyes. Oh, my God, that isn't even what I meant and you know it, I told him, reaching over and shoving him with my other hand. You said it, he shrugged. Well, it's true, I told him. Is it? Yes. Even Maya said so, I said without thinking. His brows lifted. Did she now? He mused. Yes. Right before she told me you weren't a liar, I said. Don't tell her I told you that, though. Don't worry. I'm sure many people have said worse things about me, he chuckled. The rest of the drive to Jack and Shirley's passed quickly, with us teasing each other and bantering back and forth about silly things. He pulled up to the curb and shot me a glare as he unbuckled himself, pointing his finger at me as if to say don't you even dare when I reached for the handle. I rolled my eyes but stayed in my seat, watching him as he walked around the front end, my eyes once again darting to those strong, muscular arms of his that strained against his t-shirt sleeves. They traveled over to his torso as he came towards the door, taking in the stretch and pull of the fabric as he moved. I wondered what it would be like to have those muscular arms toss me on a mattress, what it would feel like to have his solid chest pressed against mine, keeping me pinned between him and the bed. What it would be like for those calloused hands to do more than just unhook the back of my tutu, for his warm lips to explore more than just my lips. I shook those uncharacteristically lustful thoughts from my mind just as the door to the truck jerked open. I swallowed, meeting Wesley's eyes, watching as his pupils dilated and his nostrils flared and his jaw clenched and his hand tightened on the metal of the car door. Something about how he looked at me, like he wanted to devour me, sent all of those thoughts flooding back into my mind. Like a tidal wave washing over and through me, my body seemed to have a visceral response to him and his presence, and how he asserted his dominance over me. Not because he wanted to control me or boss me around, like someone else I knew. But because he wanted to take care of me, protect me. He stepped back, standing even with the door so I could hop out, his jaw still clenched, his body held as still as a statue. I didn't even think he was breathing, he was so stiff. His sharp inhale as I brushed my shoulder against his chest while walking past him told me he had definitely not been breathing. "You know, I can open my own car door, Wesley," I said as I heard him shut the door to the car and we walked up the path to their house. "I know you can, but that doesn't mean you should," he muttered, his hand coming to the small of my back, brushing the skin exposed by the low V of my leotard and sending little tingles across my skin. I reached out and rang the doorbell as we reached the top of the porch steps. "I'm a grown, independent woman and dash. Trust me," Wesley said, turning my body towards his and sliding his arm around my waist. "I am more than aware that you're all grown up now," he told me in a low voice, angling his face down towards me. All his restraint from only moments before seemed to have dissipated, his intention switching from holding himself back to letting himself loose. He splayed his fingers against my back, pushing my body into his, until not even a piece of paper could fit between us. I couldn't help it, couldn't resist the pull towards him I always felt when we were together. My body melted into his touch, my arms forming a loose circle around his neck, pulling my upper body closer to him. A sigh escaped me, forced out of my body because of the protective, possessive man who had me wrapped in his arms, his touch somehow firm and tender at the same time. His nose slid along mine, and I closed my eyes, lifting my chin to meet his lips when the door opened behind us. I jumped and tried to pull away from him, but his arm around my waist held me in place and his lips twitched with a silent laugh. "Oh, Wesley." "Hi," Shirley said. "It's so good to see you. Here. With Haven," she teased. "Hi Shirley," he greeted, his eyes never leaving my rapidly heating face. "Don't you two look so cute together?" "M.O.M." I exclaimed without thinking, twisting my head to look at her. I found her looking at me with wide eyes and a slack jaw, which turned into a sad smile. Silver lined her eyes, and my hand came up to cover my mouth. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Wesley let my waist go so I could walk over to her, but his hand slid into mine so we were still touching, still connected. I wasn't thinking, it just came out and dash. "No need to apologize," she murmured, waving me off. "You can call us whatever you like," she added. I nodded, and Wesley and I followed her inside. Jack sat in the same spot I saw him in last week, with his cane nearby just as before. Even with all the top-notch physical therapy and treatment he'd gotten when they moved to California, he'd never fully gained feeling and control of his right side. "Hey Haven," he called out as we entered. "Wesley," he added, his eyes dipping down to where Wes's hand connected with mine and then up to Wesley's face with a wink. "Hi," I said, ignoring his teasing and not calling him Dad or Jack to avoid any further awkwardness. "Did you just say Haven?" A very pregnant, very uncomfortable-looking Tiffany walked out of the kitchen, her blonde ponytail swinging behind her and a metal water bottle in her hands that she had clearly just refilled. I squealed, like a preteen girl at a boy band concert, and let go of Wes's hand and sprinted towards her. Taking care to avoid her massive baby bump, I wrapped my arms around her and gave her a huge hug. She stayed stiff for half a second before she returned my hug and said, "What the fuck is going on?" Tiffany! Shirley scolded. Language. What? She's almost 21 now, right? I'm sure Haven does her fair share of cursing. She pulled back to look at me. Don't you, Havy? Oh, I don't care if Haven hears it. I'm worried about the little ears in your belly. Shirley exclaimed. Babies can hear us before they are born. You don't want to influence her. Mom, if this girl doesn't come out of me saying fuck, then I will be shocked. When are you due? I asked her, changing the subject for her. Just a few more weeks. May I? I asked, gesturing at her belly. Of course. You don't have to ask, She trailed off, paused and looked at me with a frown, then glanced at Wesley behind me. Wait, you found her? She whispered. She found me, he said. It was a coincidence, I said with an eye roll as I placed my hands on Tiff's belly. A tiny kick, followed by a hard push outward by a foot, greeted me. I smiled and then removed my hand. Do you have any names picked out? No, we want to wait until we see her, she told me. I can't wait to meet her, I said. I'm so happy you'll get to. Her lip quivered, and she wiped at the water lining her green eyes. Oh hell, I'm not crying, I swear. It's just pregnancy hormones, she exclaimed. Why didn't you two tell me? Tiff said as I walked to Jack, sitting down next to him to give him a hug. Does Scott know? We wanted to surprise you, and no, not yet. We're waiting until he's back from his trip, Shirley replied. I see coffee went well? Jack muttered. I pulled back to see him looking and smiling at Wesley. And dinner. And brunch, Wesley added with pride. Wes! I hissed, but he just continued to stand there straight and tall, his arms crossed over his chest, his smile growing at my indignation. I narrowed my eyes at him as Jack kept talking. I always had a feeling there would end up being something more between the two of you. Didn't I always say that, Shirley? He did, Tiffany said as she maneuvered herself into an armchair with a loud sigh of relief. We all did, she added. Oh God, please stop. I can't believe this, I sighed as I buried my face in my hands. I see you for the first time in almost 12 years, and all you want to do is tease me about my Wesley? My Wesley? Wes teased, catching my eye again with a raised brow, looking like a preening peacock. I wanted to ask you something, I said to Shirley, desperate for a change in subject and non-red cheeks. Of course, Shirley said. What did you need? I have some extra comp tickets for the premiere on Friday, I said. My gaze met Wesley's for a moment before shifting back to Shirley. I would give them to Wes, but he already bought some, and so he suggested I give them to you too. I looked down at my hands and bit the inside of my cheek to keep from rambling or spitting out the truth. I could feel Wesley's eyes on me and sense his slight concern and confusion, but he said nothing. Thankfully. Wait, what premiere? Tiff asked, looking around at all of us. What am I missing? Haven is a soloist with the new Redwood Forest Ballet Company, Shirley squeaked out with excitement. That's fantastic! Tiffany exclaimed. Is that why you both insisted Justin and I needed to come with you next weekend to the ballet? Shirley chuckled and nodded. It all makes so much more sense now. Tiffany laughed. Of course we'll take those tickets, Haven, Jack declared. We have some for next week too, but no reason we can't go see it twice. I agree. I'm seeing it every night, Wesley said. I pursed my lips together and just gave him a look. Seriously? Every night? He nodded. Why? He shrugged. Why not? You don't have to do that, I told him, shaking my head. I want to, he replied, his voice quiet. His gaze softened as we stared at each other, and another layer of that thick wall protecting my heart fell away. Haven. We ended up staying at Jack and Shirley's for dinner, and by the time we made it back to my apartment, it was late evening. Did Shirley tell you what was in this box? Wesley asked as he shut the apartment door with his foot. She said it was some stuff from my old room, I said. They kept it all just in case. Did you want to look at it now? In a minute? I was going to change first, I said, jerking my thumb over my shoulder at my bedroom. Don't change too much. He winked. I like you the way you are. I scrunched my nose up at him and narrowed my eyes. You're right, that was super cheesy, he admitted. I laughed and shook my head. I'll be right back. Where do you want this? Wesley called after me as I closed the bedroom door. On the coffee table, I replied. I quickly changed out of my dance clothes into leggings and my old, too big Salt Lake City ballet sweatshirt. I grabbed a pair of fuzzy socks, then paused, remembering how Maya always complained about my ballerina feet. So, instead of just throwing the socks on, I ducked into my bathroom and washed my feet. Then I brushed my teeth too. Just in case. When I came back out into the living room, Wesley was waiting for me on the plush gray couch, his arms slung over the back and one leg crossed over the other. I walked around him to the other end of the couch. But before my body could sink into the cushions, his arm grabbed me and pulled me to his side. Maya isn't here, he murmured, his hand resting on the smallest part of my waist. I looked up at him. How do you know? She messaged me when you were changing at the theater, asking if you were with me because you hadn't come back. Then she told me she was going home to her dad's for dinner. I swallowed and nodded, then turned to the small box in front of us. I saw Wes pout out of the corner of my eye, but he let go of me so I could scoot forward and look inside. The first thing I pulled out had been stored in thick bubble wrap. I held in a gasp as I unwrapped it, revealing the small white and gold music box Wes had gotten me for Christmas almost 12 years ago. He sat up straighter as I opened it, but his face held disappointment when he realized it was empty. What was in it? He asked. Nothing. It was always empty, I said. I never had any jewelry special enough to put in it. He nodded, then took it from my hands, turning it so he could wind up the music. As he set it down on the coffee table, the sound of the waltz of the flowers filled the room, and I looked in the box on the table again. Oh my God! I squealed, lifting out the glittery purple folder sitting on top. I ignored everything else in the box. Nothing was as important as that folder. That folder held every letter Wesley had ever sent me in chronological order on one side and all the envelopes on the other. Look! I exclaimed, angling my body to show it to him. It matches the glitter from your costume you got all over me, he teased, gesturing at his black shirt as he leaned back into the cushions. I said I was sorry. I laughed, scooting back to be against the couch and his side. Plus, you were the one who hugged me first. I reminded him. He shrugged. True, and I don't regret it. It's your letters, I told him, opening it up and pulling them all out. See? Our eyes met over the top of the papers, and for a moment, I was 9 years old again, waiting at the window, watching for the mail to be delivered, or coming home and running down to the mailbox to yank it open and see if he'd replied to me yet. For a brief second, I was that little girl, sitting in her private bedroom, scratching out a quick PS in the middle of the night because I'd remembered something urgent I needed to tell him that couldn't wait until morning. I looked back to the papers and settled closer against him, nestling into his warmth and his strength. His arm came back around my waist, holding me securely, and my head leaned on his chest as I read the first one out loud, with my music box playing in the background like a soundtrack to a movie. Dear Pen Pal. Hello. My name is Wesley. I am 12 years old, and I am in 6th grade at Crescent Lake Elementary in Northern California. I'll be honest, I am only writing this letter because my teacher said we have to. She said if we don't, we'll get an F. Let's skip that one, Wesley grumbled, grabbing it out of my hand and tossing it behind the couch. Fuck, Haven, why did you even keep that one? He groaned, leaning his head back and rubbing his hand over his face. For proof. Proof of what? He mumbled into his hand. That assholes can turn out to be nice guys sometimes, I said, getting up and grabbing the paper from the floor behind us. And because of this. I turned it over and handed it to him, showing him my original response. The one I wrote in the heat of the moment, the one I never sent to him. The one where I called him a big, ugly meanie. His eyes scanned over the words written in red crayon, his lips pursing as he held in a laugh. Big, ugly meanie, huh? I nodded, and he shook his head and handed the letter back to me. You should have sent me that one. Not that your other response wasn't effective. This one just hits differently. I put the letter back in the folder and tossed it on the coffee table as I sat back down next to him. I didn't want to get in trouble. Troublemakers got moved around more often. I was just starting to feel at home with Jack and Shirley, and I was afraid of losing that. Why didn't you tell them? About your adopted parents flaking on you? Or any of the other things you told me about? Wesley asked. I curled my legs up into my body as I thought about my response. I was so close to telling them, to spilling everything to Jack and Shirley, but at the last second, I changed my mind. Instead of being honest, I opted to tell a little white lie, not mentioning the actual reason I had those extra tickets. They probably knew I was lying, but it didn't matter. The point was to keep it from them. I didn't want them to find out. I was protecting them, I admitted as I looked up at him. His eyes narrowed and his jaw clenched. His breathing deepened, and I felt his heart pounding faster. He held me more firmly as he growled out, Haven. Not Matthew and Melissa, I said, bringing my hand up to his heaving chest. We both glanced down at where I touched him, where underneath my palm, his heart rate returned to normal, and his breathing slowed, just as it had in my dressing room earlier. His hand came up to cover mine, keeping it in place over his heart, his thumb stroking small circles into my skin. I couldn't care less about protecting them. I'm not giving any more energy to them. They're not worth it. But, Jack and Shirley, I clarified, looking back into his eyes, watching as his darkened, almost black gaze returned to his normal chocolate brown. I know. I'm sure they already feel. I pressed my lips together and gripped his shirt in my hand. They don't need to know. I shook my head. The words I tried to say to him wouldn't come out. I just hoped he would understand what I was trying to say. That I didn't need to add to the guilt I knew they already felt for how everything happened. He pulled me closer to his body, letting go of my hand so both arms held me. I pressed my forehead into his chest to hide the glistening in my eyes. I knew we needed to talk about it. Jack and Shirley and me. And Scott. I knew that needed to happen at some point. But I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to open up those old wounds. I wasn't ready to confront those emotions or deal with any of that. I was content just being happy and reconnecting with them. It would happen eventually, when I was ready. His hands rubbed my back, and he held me, waiting for me to speak again, and my cheeks heated as I realized how often this seemed to happen when I talked with him. I'm sorry. I groaned into his shirt. This is ridiculous. It seems like every time we're together, I end up confessing something super emotional to you, and you end up comforting me when I'm crying. I don't mind, he said. That's what a boyfriend does. I jerked back and stared at him, my mouth gaping open, an incredulous laugh spilling from my mouth. Pretty presumptuous of you to think. He cut my words off by pressing his lips to mine, his hand moving to the back of my neck to hold me in place. I melted into his body and into his kiss. It was both strange and yet natural how comfortable we were together, how instinctively my body responded to him. My hands moved to his face, trying to pull him closer, my fingers scratching through his beard to hold on tighter. The kiss after our dinner had been tender and sweet and was the culmination of not only our date but the build-up of the connection we had forged as kids. But this kiss had a hint of heat behind it and a touch of possessiveness in it that did delicious things to my insides. Wesley. I breathed as he broke away from my mouth and trailed light kisses along my jaw. Haven, he replied, my name on his lips like a prayer. His voice was low and gravelly, and his mouth moved against my skin as he spoke, sending shockwaves of pleasure through my whole body. I forgot what I had wanted to say to him. The capability of forming coherent words had left me. All I knew was him and his touch and his kisses on my neck and jaw. His breath tickled over the trail of kisses his mouth made, and I whimpered, the noise escaping me before I could even stop it. Then his mouth was back on mine, our lips tangling together in desperation. I scrambled to get closer to him, almost climbing into his lap to close the distance between our bodies. The heady combination of his kisses, his touch, his sexy voice, and his sweet, spicy, woodsy scent had me in a haze. I was ready to give in, to let it envelop me and let my desires take the lead. But before I could act on it further, he pulled back from me, moving me so I was no longer attached to his body, holding me at arm's length. The same lust swirled in his eyes, and I could sense his reluctance as he put distance between us. He cupped my cheek and stood up from the couch, moving until I was sitting, and he stood in front of me. "I should go," he muttered, even as he stayed in place and stared down at me, his other hand mirroring his first on my face. "You need to rest. You have an important night coming up," he added. I nodded, even though I didn't want him to leave. I wanted him to stay, even though I knew it was much too soon for us to take that step together, no matter how strong our connection was or how deep my feelings for him ran. But I wouldn't deny I wanted it. I wanted him so badly it hurt. I wanted to be his in every way. He bent down and kissed my forehead. "Good night, twinkle toes," he said, then he walked around the couch and showed himself out.